The morning of my son's 7th birthday, a sheriff's deputy read me my own address like a crime scene. Restraining order, effective immediately. Leave the house. My wife stood in the doorway, our 2 kids tucked behind her legs, tears she could turn on like a faucet. The papers claimed I'd left bruises. No doctor had ever seen them. No ER, no photo, no report. Just her signature in a story that grew worse every time she told it. She'd already fed it to the whole street. "Everyone believes me," she said. I set down the cake I'd been frosting. 7 blue candles rolled off the counter and onto the floor. I had 3 weeks before a judge decided whether I was a father or a threat. 3 weeks was enough, because she'd forgotten who else had been in that room. I'm Corbin, 34, and the man that deputy walked out had spent 11 years carrying other people's worst days without ever dropping one. So let me tell you how my wife turned the frosting of a birthday cake into the last morning I would sleep in my own house. The cake was chocolate, because Eli only liked chocolate. I'd been up since 5, because that's what a 24-hour shift does to your body. It forgets how to sleep in. I had the frosting knife in one hand and a bag of blue candles in the other when the doorbell rang. I remember thinking it was too early for the party. Vanessa was already at the door. That should have been the first thing I noticed. She was dressed, hair done. 7:40 in the morning, and she looked like she was going somewhere, and our daughter June was on her hip in a way June hadn't been carried since she was 2. "Corbin Hale," the deputy said. "That's me." He held out a folder, plain manila. He said the words the way you say words you've said 1,000 times and stopped hearing. Temporary protective order. I was to have no contact. I was to vacate the residence today. There would be a hearing in 3 weeks to determine whether the order became permanent. I looked at the folder. I looked at my wife. She didn't look surprised. That was the thing. A deputy comes to your door at 7:40 in the morning and reads your husband a restraining order, and any wife on earth would look surprised, confused, afraid, something. Vanessa looked like a woman watching a plan land exactly on the runway she'd built for it. "Vanessa," I said, "what is this?" "You know what it is." Her voice was steady, rehearsed steady. "I'm not doing this in front of the kids." Eli came halfway down the stairs then. 7 years old in dinosaur pajamas, hair sticking up, the way he looked every single morning of his life that I'd been lucky enough to be home for. He saw the deputy. He saw me holding the folder. "Is it my party?" he asked. Nobody answered him. I set the frosting knife down on the counter. My hands were steady. I've pulled a man out of a rolled sedan with steady hands. This was not going to be the morning they shook. 7 blue candles were still in the bag. I set that down too. 2 of them rolled off the counter and hit the floor, and in the quiet of that kitchen, it sounded enormous. "I'll go," I told his deputy. "I'm not going to make a scene in front of my children. Can I take clothes?" He said I could take personal items, supervised. He was decent about it. I'll always remember that he was decent about it, because almost nothing else that morning was. I went upstairs with him standing at the door of my own bedroom, and I put 3 days of clothes in a duffel because some animal part of my brain still believed this was 3 days, that it was a mistake, that somebody would read the file, laugh, and send me home in time to light the candles. When I came back down, Vanessa followed me to the porch. The deputy gave us the length of the walk, and that's when she leaned in close so it looked from the street like a wife saying a hard goodbye, and she whispered it. "You'll never see them again." Then she smiled. "A small one, just for me." I stood on my own front lawn holding a duffel bag while a deputy's cruiser idled at the curb, and across the street I watched Marcy Whitfield's curtain move. By 9, 3 neighbors had texted Vanessa. I know because she told the deputy, loudly, that she felt safer already with people watching. By noon, the version going around the cul-de-sac was that the fire department's own Corbin Hale, the guy who did the CPR demo at the block party, the guy who let every kid on the street climb on the engine, had been putting his hands on his wife for years, and hadn't we all suspected something? We had not all suspected something, because it had never happened. Here is what the folder said, in the careful, bloodless language of a sworn declaration, that on multiple occasions I had grabbed my wife by the arms hard enough to leave marks, that I had a temper that frightened the children, that 2 weeks earlier I had cornered her in the kitchen and she'd feared for her life. There were dates. There were specific dates. I read those dates standing in my brother Theo's apartment that night, on his couch, with his dog's head on my knee, and I felt the first thing move in me that wasn't shock. because I knew where I'd been on those dates, and so did the county. If you've ever had the truth on your side and watched it not matter, if you've ever stood there holding a fact so solid you could set it on a table while the whole room agreed on a lie, take 1 second right now and hit like and subscribe so this story reaches somebody who needs to hear it tonight. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read everyone. Now let me tell you what I found in those dates. Let me back up because you need to understand who my father was, or you won't understand why I did what I did next. My dad left when I was 9, except he didn't leave. That's the version I grew up believing, because it was the version my mother needed to be true. The real version I only got at 22, from an aunt, at a funeral. My father hadn't walked out. He'd been walked out. My mother had told a story, and the story had teeth. And by the time anyone checked, he was 3 states away and too broke, and too broken to fight it. I have exactly 4 memories of my father. In one of them, he's teaching me to tie a bowline knot on the back steps. In another, he's crying in a parked car and telling me it wasn't my fault, and I didn't know what it was. I spent my childhood believing my father chose to disappear. I was 30 before I understood he'd been disappeared. So when Eli was born, I made him a promise he was too new to hear. I whispered it into the top of his head in a hospital room at 4 in the morning. Whatever happens, I said, you will never wonder if I chose to leave. You will never have to find out at a funeral that the story was wrong. 7 years later, a deputy handed me a folder that made me a stranger to my own kids. You understand now why I didn't beg on that porch. Begging was what the story wanted. Begging was a man out of control. I don't lie, and I don't have to. The first 4 days, I did the wrong things right. I did not call Vanessa. I did not drive past the house. I did not answer when Diane, Vanessa's mother, called me 11 times in one afternoon because I knew, the way you know a downed power line is live, that every one of those calls was bait. Later, I'd learned Diane had told 2 separate neighbors that she'd always known. Diane, who had toasted me at my own wedding. Diane, who had cried when Eli was born. But that first week, mostly, I sat in my brother's spare room and did the hardest thing a father can do, which is nothing. I couldn't go to Eli's real party. I couldn't call to sing to him. The order said no contact, and I would rather have swallowed glass than give them one true sentence to put in front of a judge. So I sat with the cake going stale in a fridge I no longer had a key to, and I waited for a Monday, because Monday I had an appointment with a lawyer. And until Monday, there was nothing on this earth I could legally do. Until Monday, Paula Ellsworth's office was above a bakery, and the whole waiting room smelled like bread, which felt like a cruel joke on a man who couldn't eat. She was maybe 50, silver at the temples, reading glasses she never actually put on. She let me talk for 6 minutes without saying a word, and then she asked me exactly one question. Were there ever any medical records? Ever, even once? An urgent care, an ER, a doctor's note, a photo she sent a friend? No. You're sure? I'm a paramedic, Ms. Ellsworth. I know what a documented injury looks like. There was never a documented anything, because there was never an injury. She nodded slowly. Then she said the sentence that gave me back my spine. Then what she has is a story, and stories can be taken apart. She explained it to me the way you'd explain a fire to someone who'd never seen one. The order I'd been served was called an ex parte order. Latin, she said, for from one side. A judge had signed it having heard exactly one human being, my wife. No hearing, no cross-examination, no chance for me to say a word. That's by design, she said, because sometimes people really are in danger, and the system has to move before the abuser can. And sometimes, she said, people who are not in danger figure out exactly how to use a system built for people who are. The morning it was signed, Vanessa got temporary sole custody of the kids and temporary possession of the house. That's what an ex parte order does. It doesn't decide the truth. It just decides who sleeps where until the truth gets its turn. When's its turn? I asked. 3 weeks, the full hearing, both sides, witnesses, evidence, cross-examination. That's where you get your day. She finally took off the glasses she'd never put on. The question, Corbin, is what we walk in there holding. I asked her what we were up against. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said, in this county, in a case like this, the person who files first and cries best starts ahead. She said there was a legal presumption that could kick in, that if the order was made permanent, it would count against me in the custody case, hard, maybe for years. So we don't let it become permanent, she said. We make her prove it. And she can't prove what didn't happen. But Corbin, and here she leaned forward, we can't just say it didn't happen. Everybody says it didn't happen. We have to show the seams. I asked her what a seam was. She smiled for the first time. A story that isn't true has to touch the real world somewhere. It has dates, places, people who were supposedly there. Every one of those is a seam. And you, she said, have a very specific job. Your job is to be the most boring, honest, cooperative man that Courthouse has ever seen. No contact, no drama, not one wrong move. Because the second you give her a real incident, she doesn't need the fake ones anymore. I walked out of that office smelling like bread with a legal pad full of dates and one instruction that would carry me through the worst 3 weeks of my life. Be boring. Be honest. Show the seams. The problem with being boring is that a lie isn't. A lie moves. It works a room while the truth is still filling out paperwork. My shift came back around 2 days after I met Paula, and I went in because a protective order doesn't touch your job unless someone makes it, and because Station 6 was the last place on Earth that still felt like solid floor. I geared up. I checked the rig. I did the thing I've done 4,000 mornings. And I felt it the second I walked into the day room. That small hitch, the half second too long before somebody says, hey. Most of the crew were exactly who they'd always been. Danny Sullivan handed me a coffee and said, "This is garbage, all of it," and didn't make me talk about it. Cap put me on the schedule like nothing had changed. But there was a newer guy, a probie named Fultz, who I caught looking at me twice with a question in his face he was too smart to ask out loud, and I understood something I hadn't before. The story didn't need everyone to believe it. It just needed to be in the room. Once it's in the room, it's on you to disprove it. Forever, in every glance. And there's no document for that. You can't file a certified copy of "I have never once hurt anyone." That's the part the neighbors never see. They think the injustice is the order. The order's just the paper. The injustice is that from the morning it's signed, a good man has to walk around being innocent out loud, and no amount of it is ever quite enough. I ran 2 calls that shift. A diabetic in a bathtub, a fender bender on Elm. I did them clean. I did everything clean because Paula's voice was in my head. One wrong move and she doesn't need the fake ones anymore. And I'd realized the same rule ran through my whole life now. Not just the case. Everything. If I so much as raised my voice at a driver who cut off the engine, it would find its way into a filing. So I didn't. I was the calmest man in 3 counties. I was calm the way a man walks across a frozen lake is calm. Every step measured, because you can hear the ice. Between shifts, I lived inside the no-contact order, and I want to tell you what that's actually like, because people picture a dramatic thing, and it's not. It's 1,000 tiny amputations. I couldn't text Eli good night. I couldn't call to ask if June's cough was better. I couldn't answer the number when it was Vanessa, and it was 4 times that first week, and I let it ring every time, because I knew each call was a fisherman's line with a hook on the end. One recorded "I miss you, Corbin" away from becoming contact I initiated. I couldn't drive down my own street. My mail went to a house I wasn't allowed within 100 yards of. I bought a toothbrush and a phone charger because mine were in a bathroom I couldn't enter. I slept on my brother's couch with a dog I was allergic to, and I lay awake counting the specific things. Bath time, the way Eli needed the hall light exactly halfway on, the song June wouldn't sleep without. Somewhere across town, someone was doing those things for my kids and telling them I'd left because I was dangerous. That was the fuel, not rage. Paula had taken rage away from me as a tool correctly. Something colder and more useful, the absolute refusal to let the last true thing my children knew about their father get painted over. So I got up every morning and I did the boring, honest, unglamorous work of taking a story apart, one thread at a time. The first seam almost made me sick. It was so easy. 2 of the specific dates in Vanessa's declaration, the 2 where she swore I'd cornered her, where she feared for her life, were nights I had not been in the house at all. I'd been at Station 6, on shift, 24 hours on, in a building with 9 other people, a logbook, a dispatch record, and a truck that doesn't move, without 3 signatures. I hadn't cornered my wife in the kitchen on the night of March 19th. On the night of March 19th, I had helped cut a teenager out of a Honda on Route 9 and ridden in the back of the medic unit holding his hand so he wouldn't look at his leg. "That's not a seam," Paula said when I told her. "That's a hole you could drive the engine through. Get me the logs." Officially, through the department, I don't want anything that looks like you went digging on your own. That mattered to her, that everything come clean and by the book. She said it more than once. "We do this right," she said, "or we don't do it. If we cut one corner, they'll say we cut all of them." So I requested the shift records the proper way, through my captain, Walt Hendricks, who read the reason on the form and set it down on his desk very carefully and looked at me for a long moment. "Corbin," he said, "how long have I known you?" "9 years, Cap." 9 years. He signed the form. "I've seen you hold a stranger's hand while they died. I've seen you carry a 90-pound woman down 4 flights with the ceiling coming down. You know what I've never once seen you do?" I didn't answer. "Raise your voice." He slid the form back across the desk. "Whatever you need. The logs, the crew, me on a stand, whatever you need. This house takes care of its own." I got to my truck before I let myself feel that one. The order was never really about safety. It took me a week to see the shape of the whole thing, and when I did, it was almost impressive. The Monday after I was removed, I tried to move some money, my half of the mortgage, into an account Vanessa couldn't touch. The way Paula had told me to protect myself, the transfer bounced. I logged in and stared at a joint checking account that had held $11,000 and now held $400. It had been drained on the 3rd of the month, 2 days before the order, before the deputy ever knocked, before the birthday. She'd already moved the money. You don't drain a joint account 2 days before you're suddenly, unexpectedly, afraid for your life. You drain it because you've got a date on a calendar and you're getting ready for it. I brought the statement to Paula. She looked at it for a long time. "This is the tell," she said. "Fear is chaos. This is a plan. People who file these in a panic don't have their finances rearranged first." She made a copy. "It also tells me the motive, which the judge will want because judges hate a lie without a reason and love one with a clean one." She looked up. "Corbin, when did you tell her you wanted out of the marriage?" I hadn't told her that part. I told her now. The marriage had been dead a long time, quietly, the way they die when nobody's cruel, just gone. 2 months back, I'd found out, the plain, accidental way you find out, that Vanessa had been seeing someone. I didn't blow up the house over it. I'm not built that way, and the kids were asleep down the hall. I told her calmly that I thought we should separate, that I wanted to do it decently, share the kids 50-50, sell the house, or buy her out. No lawyers throwing furniture. I said I'd never keep the kids from her. I meant it. I told her that on the 2nd of the month. She drained the account on the 3rd. She filed the order on Eli's birthday, the 17th. "So let me make sure I have this," Paula said, and she was writing fast now. "You offered her an amicable equal split, and her response was to empty the account, then file a fabricated protective order that hands her the house, sole custody, and a presumption against you in the divorce. She didn't do this because she was afraid of you, Corbin. She did it because you offered her fair, and fair wasn't winning enough." She set down the pen. "It matters if it works," she said, though neither of us had heard those words yet. That was Renee's line. Weeks in the future, and when I finally heard Renee say them out loud in a courtroom, I would think back to this exact afternoon, when Paula reverse engineered them from a bank statement. That's her whole engine. Fair wasn't gonna get her everything. So she reached for a weapon that would. I asked what our weapon was against a weapon like that. "The opposite of hers," Paula said. "She's using a story. We're going to use the world. Documents, dates, people who were actually there. She built something that only stands up if nobody checks, so we check. Everything, out loud on the record, where she can't uncheck it." She almost smiled. She weaponized the fact that most people won't do the work. We're going to do the work. The declaration was the midpoint of everything, because the declaration was the one thing Vanessa had signed her name to. Paula got me a copy of the full sworn statement, and one gray afternoon we read it together, line by line, the way you'd read a will or a bomb. It was good, I'll give her that. It was good in the way a forgery is good. She'd stayed vague where vague was safe and specific only where specific sounded brave. He would grab my arms. No date, no bruise photo, just the shape of a thing. But then, twice, she'd reached for detail, because a story needs a little detail to breathe, and detail is where the seams are. She'd written that on the night of March 19th, I came home from a shift, in a rage, and left marks on her upper arms. She'd written that our children saw it and were afraid to be alone with their father. I read that line, afraid to be alone with their father, and I had to stand up and walk to the window because Eli had fallen asleep against my chest more nights than I could count, and June wouldn't let anyone else check her closet for monsters, and this woman had put her hand on a Bible and sworn they were afraid of me. Corbin. Paula's voice was gentle, but it had a hook in it. Come back. Look at me. Feeling it is fine. Showing it in that courtroom is a gift to her. She needs you to be the man in her story. Don't be him. Not for 1 second. I came back to the table. Now, she said, tapping the page, March 19th. She got specific. That's her mistake, not ours. And there's a second one. She tapped lower. She says here she has ongoing fear. But look what she did on March 20th, the morning after. She turned her laptop around. It was a text message from Vanessa's phone to mine sent at 9:14 a.m. on March 20th, the morning after the night she'd sworn under oath that she feared for her life. Can you grab creamer on the way home? And Eli has a dentist thing at 3. I forgot. You're a lifesaver. You're a lifesaver. The morning after. People who fear for their lives, Paula said quietly, do not text their abuser to pick up creamer and call him a lifesaver. A story has to touch the real world somewhere, Corbin. This is where it touched. And it left a print. I asked her if that was enough. It's a seam, she said. It's a good one, but she'll have an answer. I was managing him. I was afraid to set him off. Juries and judges have heard that, and sometimes it's even true. One seam is a coincidence. We need the fabric to come apart in her hands. We need enough seams that no answer covers all of them at once. Then she said the thing I wasn't ready for, which means I have to ask you about the people who were actually there, because someone always is. The people who were actually there, it turned out, included a doorbell. Marcy Whitfield lived directly across the cul-de-sac, her camera point more or less at our driveway. Every suburb has one house whose doorbell watches the whole street, and on ours it was Marcy's. Paula sent a proper records request, then a subpoena the by-the-book way. Nothing I touched. The footage came back a week later on a flash drive, and we watched it in her office with the blinds down. You can learn a lot about a marriage from a doorbell camera. There's my truck leaving at 6 a.m. for a shift. There's me coming home at 7 the next morning. And there's Eli, small in the frame, running out to meet me in the driveway the way he always did. And I had to look away from that part. But here's what mattered. On the night of March 19th, the night Vanessa first swore I cornered her in the kitchen, the time-stamped footage showed my truck pulling out of that driveway at 5:52 in the evening and not coming back until 7:10 the next morning. I was never there. The house she said I'd raged in had my truck absent from its driveway for the entire window. That's the log confirmed from a second angle, Paula said. The station says you were at work. The doorbell says your truck never came home. 2 independent records, no way to reconcile them with her story. She scrubbed the footage back and forth. This is what I meant by using the world. She only had to fool one judge for one morning. She didn't count on the fact that the modern world writes everything down. Then the footage did something I didn't expect. Paula scrubbed forward to 2 weeks before the order, and there was Marcy Whitfield's own front door. And there was Vanessa walking up Marcy's steps with a plate of something covered in foil, going to visit, being warm. 10 days before she'd need Marcy to remember raised voices. She was recruiting, Paula said quietly. This is the part that turns my stomach after 30 years. She didn't just tell a lie, she went door to door and prepared the ground for it. Cookies to the neighbor who'd testify, her mother to the friend who might not. She built a jury before there was ever a trial. I looked at Marcy Whitfield carrying a plate up her own steps, and I thought about how she'd waved at Eli off the engine at the block party, and I understood that she wasn't evil either. She was just a person who'd been given a story and a plate of cookies, and no reason to check. Can we use this? I asked. The recruiting? We can use all of it, Paula said, but not the way you want. We're not going to stand up and call her a schemer. That's her move. Painting a villain. And if we do it, we look like her. We're gonna do the boring thing. We're gonna lay the timestamps on the table in order and let the judge count. The account drained on the 3rd, the separation offered on the 2nd, the camera on the 19th, the cookies on the 6th. We don't editorialize. We just build the calendar and let her calendar convict her. She ejected the drive. A true story survives being put in order. Only a false one falls apart when you line the dates up. So we line them up. I drove home to my brother's couch that night, holding a flash drive that proved I'd been where I said I was. And it didn't make me happy. It made me tired in a way I can't describe. The specific exhaustion of having to prove, with subpoenas and timestamps, that you did not do a thing you never did to keep children you never stopped loving. We built the calendar on Theo's kitchen table, Paula and I, a week out. She'd brought a long sheet of paper and a marker, and we laid the whole thing down in order, one date at a time. The 2nd, I offer an equal split. The 3rd, the account is drained to $400. The 6th, cookies to Marcy. The 19th, my truck gone all night, me at a wreck on Route 9. The 20th, 9:14 a.m. You're a lifesaver, grab creamer. The birthday, the 17th of the next month. The deputy on the porch. Laid out like that, in a column, it stopped being a marriage and started being a blueprint. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about having the truth on paper. Somewhere around midnight, staring at that perfect calendar, I got scared instead of relieved. What if it doesn't matter? I said. What if the judge looks at all of this and still just sees a nervous mother and an angry-looking man and splits the difference? People believe the story they walked in with. We both know that. It's the whole reason this worked in the first place. Paula capped the marker. She didn't tell me I was wrong. That's how I knew to trust her. You might be right, she said. Sometimes the calendar isn't enough. Sometimes a judge wants to look one human being in the eye and hear them say the true thing out loud, on the record, with something to lose. She looked at the blank space at the bottom of the sheet, the space where a witness's name would go if we ever got one. That's the piece we don't have yet. The calendar proves the how. It doesn't prove the why. For the why, we need a person. She rolled up the paper. But a calendar's not nothing, Corbin. A calendar keeps you from losing. It just might not be enough to let you win. Get some sleep. You've got a daughter who laughs like a fire alarm, and she's gonna need you rested. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling and did the thing you do when you've done everything right, and it still might not be enough. I made my peace with losing while refusing, absolutely refusing, to stop fighting. Both at once. That's the state they don't have a word for. The one every falsely accused person lives in for weeks, bracing for the worst with your whole body while your whole heart keeps working anyway. Here's what I want you to understand about how a lie like this works, because I didn't understand it until I lived inside one. It isn't one big lie, it's 100 small permissions. It's a neighbor who decides not to ask questions because it's not her business. It's a mother-in-law who decides the family's dignity matters more than one man's name. It's a friend who gets a phone call and is asked to just back me up on something and says yes before she really hears what she's agreeing to, because that's what friends do. Vanessa didn't need everyone to lie. She needed most people to stay quiet and one or two to nod. She'd built the whole thing on the safe assumption that people, faced with a choice between comfort and a hard truth, mostly choose comfort. And she was right about almost everyone. The neighbors chose comfort. The gossip chose itself. Diane chose her daughter loudly and started telling a version where she'd seen the bruises herself, which was interesting because there had never been any bruises to see. But Vanessa made one assumption that turned out to be wrong, and it was the most human assumption of all. She assumed her best friend loved her more than the truth. Renee Callahan had been Vanessa's best friend since before I met either of them. Maid of honor at our wedding, godmother to June. The kind of friend who had a key to our house and used it, who'd sat at our kitchen table 1,000 times, who knew where we kept the good scissors. Renee had been at his house the week before the birthday. Vanessa had called her over, and Vanessa, sure of her, certain the way you're only certain about the people closest to you, had said something to Renee that she would never, in 100 years, have said to a neighbor. I didn't know any of this yet. I'm telling you now so you'll understand the shape of what was coming. On that gray afternoon in Paula's office, I didn't have a witness. I had a shift log and a text about Creamer and a wall of neighbors who'd already decided who I was. What I had mostly was time. 12 days of it, and 2 kids on the other side of a no-contact order, being told every day that their father was a man to be afraid of. That was the part that nearly took me apart. Not the house, not my name. The idea of Eli lying in the dark, doing the math a 7-year-old does. Dad didn't come to my party. Dad isn't home. Mom cries when we say his name. And arriving at the only answer a child can reach, that it must be true, that he must have done something, that the biggest man in his life had turned out to be the monster after all. I had 4 memories of my father crying in a parked car. I was watching my son start to build his own. My phone rang on a Tuesday, June's preschool. "Mr. Hale, we're so sorry to bother you. We have June down as needing pickup at noon today, half day, and we couldn't reach the primary contact. We tried your wife twice." For 1 second, my heart came up out of the floor. They'd called me. I could go get my daughter. Then I remembered. "You have to call her mother," I said. There's a court order. I can't be the one. I'm sorry. Keep trying her." A pause on the line. "Oh, I see. It's just, you used to be listed first. It looks like you were removed from the contacts last week." Removed from the contacts, not just the house. The list. Erased from the one line where a school keeps the people allowed to love a child in an emergency. "Please keep trying her mother," I said, and I hung up before my voice could do anything I'd regret, and I sat in my truck in a parking lot, and I did not drive anywhere for 11 minutes. Then, on the 12th minute, I drove the wrong way. I want to be honest about this because it's the closest I came to losing everything, and it wasn't in a courtroom. I found myself on the road toward Millbrook, toward the house, toward the cul-de-sac I was forbidden to enter. I told myself I was just driving. I told myself a lot of things, and I ended up parked 2 streets over on the far side of the little greenbelt behind our block, well back from any line I wasn't allowed to cross, close enough to hear a kid shriek with laughter from a backyard that used to be mine. June's laugh, I'd have known it deaf. Everything in my body wanted to walk through those trees. It's the most natural thing in the world. A father's feet toward the sound of his child laughing. 3 weeks. 20 seconds through those trees and I could pick her up. She'd be so happy. She wouldn't understand why I'd been gone, and she wouldn't have to for 20 seconds. And then, in a family court file, forever. On date, the respondent violated the protective order by appearing at the residence and making contact with the minor children. That's all it would take. 1 line. Every timestamp Paula had gathered, the station log, the doorbell, the drained account, all of it gone. Outweighed by 1 true sentence about me that Vanessa could finally write. I put my hands on this wheel and I sat there and I shook, once the way I hadn't let myself in front of anyone. Then I called Paula on speaker and I said, "I'm parked near the house. I haven't crossed anything. Talk to me until I leave." She didn't lecture me. She just talked. She talked about the calendar, the exhibits, the hearing, in her flat, steady voice until my hands came off the wheel. And then she said, "Now put it in drive, Corbin. The way home is the only road that gets you back to them. Every other road is what she's counting on." I put it in drive. I drove away from the sound of my daughter laughing, and it was the hardest, most fatherly thing I did the entire 3 weeks. The court gave me supervised visitation 8 days before the hearing, 2 hours at a county family center, a social worker in the room the whole time. I have run into burning buildings with a lighter heart than I carried into that beige little room. They came in holding the social worker's hands. June saw me and forgot every instruction anyone had given her and ran, just ran, full 4-year-old speed, and hit my legs and held on, and I picked her up and put my face in her hair and did not cry, because I had promised myself I would not spend 1 second of these 2 hours letting them see me break. Eli stopped in the doorway. He looked at me the way you look at a stove you've been told is hot, wanting to come closer, not sure he was allowed, not sure I was safe. "Hey, bud," I said, easy light, like it was any Tuesday. "I hear you had a birthday." He nodded, still in the doorway. "Chocolate?" "Mom got to store one." A pause. It was fine. It was fine. 7 years old and already learning to say fine about the things that break your heart. I knew where he got that. I'd invented it. He came in eventually. He sat next to me, not on me, a careful 6 inches, and we built a tower out of the center's sad plastic blocks. And slowly, the way a fire banks and then catches, he started to be my kid again. He told me about a kid named Owen who ate a bug. He told me June had a new tooth. And then, near the end, building the tower higher, not looking at me, he said it in the flat little voice of a boy reciting something. "Mommy says you get so mad you can't help it." The social worker's pen stopped. I did not react. I want you to know how hard that was, and I want you to know I did it. I kept stacking blocks. I kept my voice at the exact temperature it had been. "Do I seem mad right now, bud?" He thought about it. Really thought. I watched a 7-year-old hold his mother's words up against the man sitting next to him and find that the two didn't match. "No," he said. "I get sad sometimes," I said. "Everybody does. But I have never once been afraid of you. And there is nothing on this earth that could make me hurt you or your sister. That's not a thing that's ever going to happen. Okay?" He nodded, and then he leaned, just leaned, that 6 inches gone, and put his head against my arm, and we finished the tower like that. At the end, when the social worker said time, he handed me a piece of paper he'd folded into a tiny square in his pocket, a drawing, a fire truck, red crayon, and a stick figure next to it in a fireman's hat, and over the figure, in the wobbling capital letters of a kid who just learned them, one word: Dad. "So you don't forget what you look like," he said, dead serious, "in case it's a long time." I kept that drawing in my chest pocket for the next 8 days. Some nights, it was the only thing that kept me boring and honest and quiet, when every cell in my body wanted to drive to that house and kick the door off its hinges. The court allowed one supervised phone call between visits. 10 minutes, the social worker on the line, a Thursday night. June got on first and told me a 40-second story about a caterpillar that had no beginning, middle, or end, and it was the best thing I'd heard in 3 weeks. Then she asked, in her small, matter-of-fact way, "Are you coming home for dinner?" And I had to find a way to say, "Not tonight." Sweetheart, that didn't crack down the middle. Then Eli. He was quieter than he'd been at the visit. Somebody had been working on him again. I could hear it, the coached flatness. There was a silence, and then he said low, like he was checking something, "Mom says if I talk to you too much, it makes her sad." 10 seconds I had, a social worker listening, every word going in a file. "Buddy," I said, "it's okay to love your mom and me both. That never makes anybody the bad guy. You don't have to pick. You just get to be a kid whose mom and dad both love him like crazy." Another silence. "The hall light," he said finally. "Nobody does it right. It's supposed to be halfway." "I know, exactly halfway. Tell whoever tucks you in, halfway." "Okay." A breath. "Night, Dad." "Good night, Eli. Halfway. I love you." The social worker said, "Time," gently, and the line went dead. And I sat there with the phone still against my ear, listening to nothing, because for 10 more seconds, it still smelled like my kid's bedtime, and I wasn't ready to hang up on that. If you've ever been turned into a stranger to your own kid, you know the exact arithmetic I ran in that beige room, driving away from 2 borrowed hours. What I didn't know yet was that the story was about to turn, in a direction I couldn't have drawn for you then if I'd tried. First, though, it came for my job. I found out from Cap, who called me in on my day off and shut his office door, which he never did. "Sit down, Corbin." Diane had done it. She'd called the department's main line, and then, when that didn't move fast enough for her, she'd written a letter to the chief, to the city, ceasing a name at the county I didn't recognize, stating that a Millbrook firefighter with an active restraining order for domestic violence was still responding to calls, entering people's homes, around women and children. She used the word liability 4 times. Diane had discovered the one lever that could take from me the last solid thing I had, and she pulled it. "They have to look into it," Cap said. "You know they do. An active order, a public letter. The city's lawyers can't just sit on that." He rubbed his face. "There's gonna be a review. Might be desk duty till it's done. Might be worse if that order goes permanent." There it was. The thing under the thing. If the order became permanent at the hearing, it wasn't just my kids. It was my career. 11 years, my pension, the job that was the whole reason I could put a roof over Eli and June in the first place. The story didn't just want to erase me from a house. It wanted to erase me from the one thing that let me provide for them at all. and it had found a way to make my own department the instrument. I felt the ice under me thin out that week. Foltz, the probie, stopped meeting my eyes at all. A guy from B Shift I barely knew asked Danny Sullivan, not quietly enough, "So, is it true?" And Danny, God bless him, said no, flat, and went back to checking the SCBA, but the question had been in the room. And once it's in the room, you know how it works by now. Once it's in the room, it's on you. For about 36 hours, I genuinely believed I might lose the job before I ever got to the hearing. I sat in Theo's kitchen and did darker math than I'd done yet. No kids, no house, no job. A man erased so cleanly that in a year, the only proof he'd ever been a good father would be a red crayon fire truck taped to a fridge that wasn't his. Then Cap did something I'll never forget. He went to the chief himself. He put 19 years of his own reputation on my side of the scale. He said, I heard this later, I have watched this man work every kind of call there is for 9 years. And if you tell me to believe a letter from an angry mother-in-law over what I've seen with my own 2 eyes, then you don't want me running this house either. He told them to do the review by the book, fast, and to let me keep working while they did, and if they wouldn't, they could review him next. They kept me working, desk adjacent, no home entries, pending the hearing, but working. You didn't have to do that, Cap, I told him. Yeah, I did, he said. That's the job. You run toward the thing everybody else runs from. He looked at me. Just win your hearing, Corbin. Go get your kids. The house will be here. I want you to notice something, because I only noticed it later. Every single thing that saved me that month came from a person choosing the truth when comfort was right there. Cap could have stayed quiet. Danny could have shrugged. They didn't. The lie needed everyone to choose easy. It only took a few people choosing hard to start pulling it apart. I just needed one more of them, and she was still hiding. 7 days out, they offered me a deal, and the deal was the cruelest thing they did. It came as a settlement conference, a conference room at the courthouse, both lawyers, both of us, a mediator with a legal pad, Vanessa across the table in a soft gray sweater, not looking at me, Diane in the hallway outside, visible through the glass, arms crossed like a bouncer. Grady laid it out in the reasonable voice men like Grady use for their worst offers. Here's a path where everybody goes home today, Mr. Hale. My client is willing to dismiss the protective order. In exchange, you agree to a custody arrangement. She keeps the house, primary residence with the children, and you take supervised visitation. Sign, and the order goes away. No hearing, no finding on the record. Clean. He spread his hands. You get your children back into your life this week. Isn't that what matters? For 1 second, I'll be honest, it was the most tempting thing I'd ever heard. This week, I could see Eli this week. No risk of a judge believing her. No losing everything on a coin flip. Just sign, and the nightmare stops. Then I made myself hear the whole sentence. Supervised visitation, a custody order built on the assumption that I was a man who needed supervising around his own kids. No finding on the record, meaning the lie never gets called a lie. It just quietly becomes the arrangement, the normal, the thing Eli and June grow up inside. Their whole childhood, Dad's the one who has to be watched. And someday, at 22, at a funeral. No, I said. Vanessa looked up then, first time. You'd rather roll the dice than see your kids? She said, soft, and there was real disbelief in it, because she genuinely could not understand a person who wouldn't take the easy thing. You always did this, always had to be right instead of happy. I'd rather lose in a room where the truth got said out loud, I told her, and I kept my voice exactly where Paula had trained it, flat and warm and unhurried, than win a deal that makes the lie their whole childhood. If a judge takes my kids after hearing everything, I'll live with a judge. I won't sign my name to a version where I'm the man you invented, not for anything, not even for this week. You're going to lose them completely, she said. You know that, and this will be the moment you could have stopped it. Maybe, I said, then it'll be the truth that lost. I can live next to that. I couldn't live next to the other thing. Grady closed his folder. Off the record, you're making a mistake. On the record, Paula said pleasantly, gathering her pad, we'll see you at the hearing. Diane glared at me through the glass the whole walk down the hall. I didn't give her my face, but I'll tell you what that no cost me. 7 more days without my children, banked against a coin flip I was probably going to lose. Walking out of that courthouse, I was pretty sure I'd just chosen my principles over my kids, and I didn't know yet that they were the same choice. 6 days out, the thing I'd been dreading started, which was that they got better at it. Vanessa's lawyer was a man named Grady Voss, and Grady Voss did this for a living. Paula knew him. "He's not evil," she told me. "He's worse. He's effective. He'll have coached her out of every scene we've got. Watch." He had. The amended witness list came in, and it was a wall. Vanessa. Diane, who would now testify she'd personally observed injuries. A neighbor, Marcy Whitfield, who would testify to hearing raised voices. And a paragraph explaining away March 19th. Vanessa now wasn't certain of the exact date. Could have been the 18th. The specifics were hard to recall through the fear. The date got soft. The Creamer text Grady would frame as trauma bonding, a known dynamic in abuse. Every seam Paula had found, they'd sewn a patch over. "This is what they do," Paula said. She didn't sound beaten. She sounded like a woman watching weather she'd forecast. "They can't make the lie true, so they make it slippery. Our job just changed. We can't win on any single seam anymore. They'll wriggle off each one. We need something that doesn't wriggle. We need a person who is on the inside of the lie and is willing to say so out loud, under oath, with penalties for perjury hanging over their head." "Who's on the inside of a lie," I said, "and willing to blow up their own life to tell it?" Paula looked at me for a long moment. "Almost nobody," she admitted. "That's why it works." Then, "But you'd be surprised what a person can't live with. Is there anyone who was close enough to her to know, and decent enough that it's eating them?" I thought about the neighbors. I thought about Diane, who'd manufactured bruises she claimed to have seen. And I thought, for the first time in 12 days, about Renee. I couldn't call Renee. That's the trap of a no-contact order. It doesn't just wall off the person who lied about you. It walls off everyone in their orbit, because one wrong call to the wrong person, and suddenly, you're the man harassing his victim's friends. So I did the only thing I could do. I gave Paula her name, and I got out of the way. "Renee Callahan," Paula repeated, writing it down. "Godmother to your daughter. Maid of honor." She underlined it twice. If she knows something and she's carrying it alone right now. And she thinks she's the only one. People will do things to stop being alone in a thing like that. She capped her pen. "I'll reach out. Properly. As your counsel. No pressure, no ambush. I'll just tell her there's a hearing, and that if she has anything relevant, the court would want to hear it. And then it's hers to carry or set down. Not yours, not mine. Hers." 4 days out, Paula called me at 10 at night. "I spoke to Renee Callahan." I sat up so fast Theo's dog fell off the couch, and a long pause, long enough that I knew before she said it. "And she was at the house 8 days before the order. Vanessa asked her to come over, and Vanessa asked her to do something. Renee wouldn't tell me what, not yet. But Corbin, I have done this 30 years, and I know the sound of a person standing at the edge of the hardest thing they'll ever do. She's there. She's right at the edge." "Is she going to testify?" "I don't know," Paula said. "I told her the date and time. I told her no one would make her do anything. And I told her the truth, which is that a good man is about to lose his children over a story, and she may be the only person alive who can put a hand on the scale for the right side." "What did she say?" "She said, 'I need to think.'" And she hung up. Paula exhaled. "Corbin, listen to me. Do not hope on this. Hope is a thing that'll make you do something stupid in the next 4 days. Prepare like she's not coming, because she might not." I said I understood. I did not understand. I hung up the phone, and I let myself hope like a house on fire. 3 days out, Paula made me practice being torn apart. She sat me in a conference room and became Grady Voss for 2 hours. She wasn't gentle about it. That was the point. "You've got quite a temper for a calm man, don't you, Mr. Hale?" she said in a voice that wasn't hers. "Isn't it true you were angry the day you were served? Angry right now, aren't you? Sitting there, jaw tight, hating my client." "I'm not angry," I said. You look angry." And I felt it. The trap, the pull to defend, to raise my voice half a degree to prove I wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice. I stopped. I took the slow breath I take before I answer a scared patient. "I'm sad, and I'd like my kids back." Paula dropped the Grady voice. That, exactly that. He is going to spend an hour trying to get you to show the room one flash of the man in her story. One. That's all he needs. A clenched fist, a raised voice, a bitter little line about her. Give him that, and every document I put on the table stops mattering, because he'll point at you and say, "There, you saw it." She leaned in. You don't get to be human in there, Corbin. Not the way you'd earned. You have to be the most boring, steady, sad man that Judge has ever watched. Can you do that? For 2 more hours in a courtroom? After doing it for 3 weeks? I've done it for 34 years, I said. I learned it from a father who never got to. She looked at me for a second. Then she made me do the whole thing again and again until I could hear the worst things a person could say about me and answer them like a man reading a weather report. She taught me to put my hands flat and open on the table where the judge could see them. She taught me that when Vanessa cried, I was to feel nothing on my face. Not triumph, not sympathy, nothing. Because a jury of one was going to be reading me the entire time. The truth's going to do the loud part, she said, packing her bag. Your only job is to be so quiet that when it gets loud, everyone knows the noise isn't coming from you. I drove back to Theo's that night, steadier than I'd been in weeks. It didn't last. That was my mistake. Because 2 days out, the fire went out. Diane got to her first. I only learned the details later, but here's what happened. Somebody, a neighbor, a cousin, it doesn't matter, mentioned to Diane that Vanessa's lawyers people had been asking whether Renee might talk. And Diane, who had spent 3 weeks building a fortress around her daughter's story, went straight to the one wall she hadn't reinforced. She showed up at Renee's house with a bottle of wine and 40 years of friendship-adjacent leverage. She talked about loyalty. She talked about what people would think of a woman who turned on her best friend in her worst hour. She talked about the kids, how confusing it would be for them, how cruel to have their own godmother take their father's side against their mother. And then Renee told me much later, Diane said the thing that did it. She set down her wine and she looked at Renee and she said, very softly, "You have kids of your own, honey. Imagine somebody trying to take them from you. That's all Vanessa's doing, protecting her babies. Are you really going to be the one who helps a man do that to a mother?" She'd flipped it. That's the genius of it, the thing I still can't fully forgive. She took the exact crime they were committing, trying to steal a father from his children, and painted me as the one committing it. And Renee, who did have kids who did know that specific terror, felt the fortress close around her too. Renee stopped answering Paula's calls. The day before the hearing, Paula told me straight, the way she'd promised she always would. She's gone dark. 3 calls, no answer. Corbin, I need you to hear this from me, and not from a judge tomorrow. Without a witness from inside that story, we walk in there with a shift log they've patched, a text they've explained, and your word against hers. And in this county, in this kind of case, that is not enough. The presumption is against you. I will fight every inch. But you need to prepare yourself for the real possibility that tomorrow that order becomes permanent, and this becomes a very long road. I didn't say anything for a while. How long a road? I finally said. Supervised visitation, maybe, if we're lucky, while we litigate the custody piece separately. Years, potentially. And every year, the story gets more true to 2 kids who are living inside it. She was quiet. I'm sorry. You asked me to always tell you straight. That's straight. I want to tell you about the night before the hearing, because it's the lowest I have ever been, and I've pronounced strangers dead on kitchen floors. I slept maybe an hour. Around 3, I gave up and sat on Theo's back step in the cold with Eli's drawing in my hand. A fire truck. A stick man in a hat. Dad, so you don't forget what you look like, in case it's a long time. It was going to be a long time. I did the math a father does at 3 in the morning. Eli would be 8 before this was through, maybe 9, maybe 10. June wouldn't remember a time before the story. They would grow up the way I grew up, believing a version of their father that a woman had built and the world had agreed to. And someday, at 22, at a funeral, an aunt would lean over and say the words that had wrecked me. It wasn't what your mother told you. And they'd have to rebuild their whole childhood in one sentence. Too late. That was the moment the calm cracked. I'm not ashamed of it. I sat on my brother's cold step and I put my forehead down on my knees and I made a sound I didn't know I had in me one time. And then I made myself stop because there were kids depending on me being able to stand up in a courtroom in 6 hours. I thought I had lost. I want to be honest with you. Sitting on that step, I had lost. In every way I could see from where I sat, it was over. I didn't know that 4 miles away, a woman was sitting on her own kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets and her phone in her hand, reading a text she'd typed and deleted 11 times, and losing, slowly, the argument Diane had planted in her. I didn't know that. So I went inside and I put on the one suit I owned, and I drove to the courthouse to lose my children with as much dignity as I could carry. If you've made it this far, you already feel the turn coming. Before I show it to you, do me a favor. In your head, right now, guess who walks through that courtroom door. I'll tell you in a second whether you're right. Most people aren't. The hearing was in courtroom 3, a small room with bad fluorescent light and maybe 20 folding chair seats, most of them empty. Diane sat behind Vanessa. 2 neighbors sat behind Diane. My brother Theo sat behind me, and Captain Hendricks came in his dress uniform and sat next to Theo, and that was my whole army. Vanessa didn't look at me once. She was good, small, tired, brave-looking, a tissue in her hand she never quite used. Grady Voss patted her shoulder for the judge to see. Judge Ellen Harmon had been on the family bench for 19 years. Paula had told me 2 things about her. 1, she'd seen every kind of liar there is. 2, she hated more than anything having her courtroom used. Grady went first. He put Vanessa on the stand and walked her through it gently, and she told the story, and I'll admit it was affecting. She teared up in the right places. She said he would grab me and let it hang. She said the kids were scared. She got vague about dates exactly the way Paula predicted and turned the vagueness into a virtue. I've tried so hard to forget the specifics. Then Diane testified that she'd seen bruises on her daughter's arms more than once. Then Marcy Whitfield testified she'd heard raised voices through the wall of our shared property line. And when they were done, the story sat in that room looking solid. And I watched Judge Harmon write something on her pad, and I thought, this is what a lie looks like when it's winning. Then Paula stood up to cross-examine, and the room changed temperature. She was so polite. That was the terrifying thing about watching Paula work. She was the most courteous person in the room, right up until the floor opened. Mrs. Hale, she said to Vanessa, I'm so sorry for what you've described. I just have a few questions to help the court understand the timeline. You mentioned injuries, bruises on your arms. Did you ever see a doctor for them? I was afraid to. Of course. An urgent care? A clinic? No. Did you photograph them, even on your phone, just for yourself? No. I wasn't thinking about evidence. I was thinking about surviving. I understand. Paula let it breathe. So the court's clear. Over these years of injuries, there is no doctor, no clinic, no photograph, no report. The bruises exist in your testimony and your mother's. Is that fair? They were real. I'm sure they felt real to you. I'm asking the court to note there is no record of them anywhere in the physical world. Now, you swore in your declaration that on the night of March 19th, your husband came home from work and cornered you in the kitchen. Do you remember swearing that? A flicker. Grady had coached this. I said I wasn't certain of the exact date. You are now, but your sworn statement was certain. It said March 19th. Paula slid a page to the clerk. Your Honor, I'd like to enter the certified duty log of the Millbrook Fire Department, Station 6 for the night of March 19th. She turned back to Vanessa, still gentle. On the night you swore your husband cornered you in your kitchen, he was signed in at a fire station 4 miles away on a documented 24-hour shift in a building with 9 other people and a dispatch record. He responded to a vehicle extraction on Route 9 at 11:40 p.m. There are 3 signatures on the apparatus log. Would you like to revise the date again? The room was very quiet. I told you I wasn't sure of the date, Vanessa said, and for the first time her voice had a different metal in it. You weren't. The station log is. Let me help. Paula's voice never rose. The morning after that night, the night of the incident you can no longer date, you texted your husband at 9:14 a.m. and asked him to pick up creamer. And you called him. And I'm quoting your own message. A lifesaver. She looked up. Is that how you speak to a man you fear for your life? He had me trained to keep him calm. That's a very useful answer, Paula said, because it explains everything and nothing. Let me ask about your mother's testimony instead. That's when it stopped being one wave and started being the flood. Paula had Diane recalled, and Diane, who had spent 3 weeks growing bolder, made the mistake bold people make. Mrs. Prescott, you testified you saw bruises on your daughter's arms more than once. When was the most recent? The week before he was removed, clear as day. The week before the order, so early June, on her arms. Yes, that's helpful because your daughter and her children spent that entire week at your lake house. There's a tagged photo posted publicly, your daughter in a sleeveless dress at a family barbecue on June 6th. Paula said it on the projector. Her arms are visible, Mrs. Prescott, all of them. Would you like to point to the bruises you saw clear as day? Diane opened her mouth, closed it. The lighting? Take your time. They may have been the other week. They may have been. Paula let that sit in the fluorescent hum. One more thing before I release you, Mrs. Prescott. You said you saw the marks at your daughter's home, but you just agreed she was at your lake house that week. Which was it? Both. I visited. You visited your own lake house where she was already staying. Paula nodded slowly. No further questions. Then she reached for the drive. Your Honor, the respondent moves to admit the time-stamped exterior camera footage from the residence directly across the street, obtained by subpoena from the homeowner. It covers the driveway of the marital home. She loaded it. This is the night of March 19th. The court will see the respondent's vehicle leave the driveway at 5:52 p.m. It does not return until 7:10 the following morning. On the night the petitioner swore under oath, her husband cornered her in their kitchen. His truck was not in the driveway, and he was signed in at a fire station 4 miles away. 2 independent records. Neither one of them can be coached. Grady stood. Grady sat back down. There was nothing to say to a timestamp. And then Paula did the thing that told me she'd been 3 moves ahead the whole time. She called the petitioner's own witness. The respondent calls Marcy Whitfield. Marcy came up looking like she'd rather be anywhere on earth. Paula was kind to her, kinder than she'd been to anyone. Mrs. Whitfield, you testified you heard raised voices through the property line. I believe you. Voices carry. In all those years across that street, did you ever once see Mr. Hale strike, grab, or threaten anyone? No, I never saw anything like that. Did you ever see a bruise, a mark, an injury on Mrs. Hale? No. Now, about 2 weeks before Mr. Hale was removed, did Mrs. Hale visit your home? Bring you anything? Marcy's eyes went to Vanessa and came back. She brought over a plate, lemon bars. And did she talk to you during that visit about what she might need you to remember? The room waited. Marcy Whitfield was not a liar. She was just a woman who'd been handed a story and a plate of lemon bars. And now she was under oath, and the two things couldn't both survive. She said things had been bad, Marcy said quietly, and that if anyone ever asked, she hoped I'd back her up about the yelling. I didn't know it was for this. I heard a TV loud sometimes. I don't actually know whose voice it was. I'm sorry. She looked at me, stricken. Corbin, I'm so sorry. No further questions, Paula said gently, and let Marcy step down, and the room had shifted again. 1 more inch. Away from a plate of lemon bars and toward the truth. Judge Harmon was writing steadily now. Once she looked up over her glasses at Vanessa, and it was not the look she'd started with. Paula sat down next to me, and under the table she pressed her hand flat. Once, which was our signal for hold. It's working. Don't move a muscle. And Vanessa saw it slipping. I watched it happen on her face. I'd been married to that face for 11 years, and I could read it like weather. Orange. She saw the room turning, and instead of retreating, she reached for the biggest card she had left. She leaned to Grady and whispered, and Grady stood and said the family center's supervised visit notes should be entered because even the social worker documented the children's fear. It was a gamble. It was meant to remind the judge that 2 kids were afraid of me. And it was the exact moment the courtroom door opened. She came in quietly, a woman in a gray coat, a little out of breath, like she'd argued with herself in the parking lot right up until the door. She had a folder held against her chest with both arms, the way you hold something you're afraid you'll drop. Vanessa turned to see who it was, the way everyone did. And I watched every drop of color leave my wife's face. "Renee," it came out of Vanessa before she could stop it. Not a courtroom voice, a kitchen voice, the voice of a woman to her oldest friend. Confused, scared, because Renee was not on any witness list. Renee was the one wall she'd been so sure of that she'd never thought to reinforce it herself. She'd sent her mother to do it, and she'd believed it was done. "You'll never see them again," she'd whispered to me on the porch. She'd been so certain. She'd counted every mouth in that story and closed every one. She'd forgotten to count the one that had been in the room. Paula was already on her feet. "Your Honor, the respondent moves to call a witness who contacted my office late last night. She was present at the petitioner's home 8 days before the order and has direct knowledge relevant to these proceedings. I understand this is irregular. I'd ask the court's brief indulgence, given what's at stake for 2 children." Grady objected, loud, about notice, about ambush. Judge Harmon held up one hand and looked at the woman in the gray coat for a long moment. "Ma'am, are you here of your own free will?" "Yes." "Has anyone promised you anything or threatened you to be here?" "The opposite," Renee said. Her voice shook and held. "Someone came to my house to make sure I stayed home." She looked at Diane, and Diane looked at the table. "I almost did." Judge Harmon set her pen down. "I'll hear her." Renee took the stand and put the folder in her lap and told the truth. "And I'm gonna give it to you the way she gave it, because I've never in my life heard anything braver." "Vanessa's my best friend," she started, and her voice broke on it, and she made herself go on. 20 years. I was maid of honor. I'm June's godmother. I did not want to be here. I want you to know I did everything I could not to be here." "Take your time," Judge Harmon said. 8 days before all this, she called me over. She was wound up. She said she was going to file for full custody, and she needed the story to be strong. And she asked me— Renee stopped, started again. She asked me to take some pictures of her arms. She said she was going to make some marks, and she needed them to look real, and she needed them time-stamped on somebody else's phone so it wasn't just hers. She'd looked up how Bruises photograph. She had a whole thing. The room had stopped breathing. And I said no. I said, "Vanessa, what are you doing?" And she said— Renee's hands were white on the folder. She said, "He's gonna leave me and take half of everything, and I'm not gonna lose my kids and my house because I was too nice." And I said, "Corbin's never touched you, and you know it." And she said— Renee looked at me for the first time, and there were tears running down her face. She said, "It doesn't matter if it's true. It matters if it works." I heard Captain Hendricks exhale behind me like he'd been hit. She texted me for a week trying to get me to change my mind. Renee opened the folder with shaking hands. "I didn't delete them. I don't know why I kept them. I think part of me knew. These are her messages to me, from her number. I gave copies to Ms. Ellsworth this morning, and I'll give them to the court, and I'll swear to everyone." Grady was on his feet shouting about authentication, about foundation, and Judge Harmon let him finish, and then said very evenly, "Counsel, I'm going to allow it, and I'm going to read them myself. And if these messages are what this witness says they are, you and I are going to have a much longer conversation about why this hearing was ever brought." She read them. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of a silent courtroom and a judge's face getting harder line by line. Then she took off her glasses. I've thought a lot about what happened to Vanessa in that last stretch, because Paula was right. The villain doesn't fall because the hero makes a speech. I never said a word on that stand. I never got the chance to, and I didn't need it. Vanessa fell because Vanessa couldn't stop. The smart thing, the thing Grady was frantically signaling, was to sit still, say nothing, let the lawyers argue the messages. But she'd been the one in control for 3 weeks. She'd whispered, "You'll never see them again," on a porch, and watched it come true. And a person who's been that certain can't sit still while the floor goes out. She stood up. "You don't understand what he's like," she said to the judge, and her voice wasn't the tired, brave one anymore. It was climbing. "He was going to take everything. He was going to take my kids. Everybody always believes him. The fire department, the neighbors, everybody, Mr. Perfect. And I'm just the crazy wife." "Mrs. Hale, sit down," the judge said. "So yeah, I made it strong because nobody was going to protect me and my children if I didn't. And you'd have done the same thing. Mrs. Hale, any mother would." "That is enough," Judge Harmon didn't raise her voice either. She didn't have to. The whole room had already heard it. Made it strong. In front of a judge, 2 lawyers, a court reporter, and God, my wife had just explained why she'd built it, which meant she'd just admitted she'd built it. Vanessa sat down. I think that was the moment she understood. I watched it land on her. Not defiance, not even fear. Just the flat gray understanding of a person who has driven off a bridge and is still, for 1 second, in the air. Diane was crying. The neighbors were staring at their shoes, and Renee sat in the witness chair with tears on her face and her spine perfectly straight, having set down the heaviest thing she would ever carry. The truth had walked into that room 3 weeks too late and still, somehow, landed right on time. The Renees of the world, the ones who tell a hard truth when it costs them everything, are the only reason any of this ever works. I didn't know, watching her shake in that chair, how much it had already cost her. Judge Harmon did not bang a gavel or make a speech. Family court isn't the movies. She was quiet and precise, and it was worse for them than any shouting could have been. She found that the petitioner had failed entirely to establish a credible claim. She found that the physical evidence, the station log, the timeline, the barbecue photo, the messages, directly contradicted the sworn declaration. She dissolved the temporary order effective immediately. She denied the permanent order. She noted for the record her finding that the petition appeared to have been knowingly fabricated, and stated she would be referring the matter to the county for review of possible perjury and for consideration in any custody determination going forward. Then she looked at me, first time all day. Mr. Hale, this court took 3 weeks of your life and your children on the strength of a document that should never have been signed the way it was. That's a failure of a system built to protect real victims, and it does no favors to the real ones. For what it's worth from this bench, I'm sorry. Your temporary parenting time is restored today. I'm ordering a custody evaluation, and I expect it to move quickly. I said, "Thank you, Your Honor." My voice was steady. I'd promised myself it would be. That was all I said in that entire courtroom. 2 words. Paula told me afterward it was the best testimony I could have given. 3 weeks of a man doing everything right, saying nothing wrong, and letting the truth do the only thing truth is good for, which is outlasting the lie. Vanessa didn't look at me as she left. Diane tried to, and I didn't give her the room. Renee stopped in the aisle, wrecked, and started to say she was sorry, and I stopped her. "You didn't do anything to be sorry for," I said. "You're the only one who did the right thing when it was hard. June's lucky to have you. So am I." She cried the whole way out. I don't blame her. She'd lost a 20-year friendship to stand in that room. Doing the right thing isn't free. It just costs less than the alternative. The custody evaluation took 2 months and came back the way the truth usually does when you stop letting people bury it. I have my kids. Primary parenting time, a structured schedule, everything by the book, everything on paper. Because I will never again live in a world where it's my word against a story. Vanessa has supervised time now, the exact thing she tried to hang on me. I take no pleasure in that. I want to be clear, for Eli and June's sake, that I take none. They need a mother. I'll never be the one who teaches them to hate her. I know too well what that does to a kid. The difference is I'll never have to lie to do it. The truth is bad enough, and it's all I'll ever have to tell them when they're old enough. And only if they ask. The perjury referral is still open. I don't check on it. That's not mine to carry. Paula handles what's Paula's. The county handles what's the county's. I handle bedtimes. Diane hasn't spoken to me, and I've stopped waiting for the apology. Renee comes to June's birthdays. She's still June's godmother. Some friendships survive the truth. Hers and mine did. I moved us into a smaller place across town. It's not much. It's got a yard the size of a postage stamp and a kitchen where 3 people don't quite fit. And it's the safest my kids have ever been. Here's the last thing. The week I got them back, I found the cake box still in the old house's fridge when I went to collect our things. 3 weeks stale. 7 blue candles rolled to the back where they'd landed on that first morning. I threw the cake out. I kept the candles. That Saturday, I made a chocolate cake from a box because chocolate is the only kind Eli likes, and I put 7 candles in it, 3 weeks and a lifetime late, and I lit them in a kitchen too small for us, and June sang the whole song twice because she likes it. Eli watched the flames for a second before he blew them out. Then he looked up at me, 7 years old, and said something I'll keep until I die. I told the lady, He said, "The one who talked to me. I told her you don't get mad. I said my dad carries people out of fires." A pause. "I knew you'd come back. You always come back." Taped to the fridge behind him was a red crayon fire truck and a stick man in a hat, and one word in wobbling capital letters. I hadn't needed it to remember what I looked like, but he'd needed to draw it. That's the difference between us and the people who lie. We don't make the story strong. We just stay until the truth catches up. If someone tried to erase you from a child's life, and you stayed calm, and you stayed honest, and you let the truth do the slow thing it does. I hope you got your kitchen too. Tell me in the comments if you did. Then go light the candles. You're already home.